On January 6th of this year, China blocked a batch of exports to Japan. Not because of a missile test, not because of a spy scandal, because Japan's prime minister said one sentence about Taiwan. The retaliation didn't touch a single ship or soldier. It touched 7 elements you've never had to spell out loud: samarium, gadolinium, terbium, dysprosium, lutetium, scandium, yttrium. Here's the number I want stuck in your head for the next 10 minutes. 1. Until recently, the number of rare earth mines in the entire United States separating those elements into anything usable was effectively 0. It is now 1. One mine, one country supplying most of the rest. Roughly 90% of global processing running through one government's control room. Stick around, because by the end of this, you'll understand why the Pentagon just became a shareholder in a mining company out in the California desert, and why that still might not be enough. Before I make China look like the villain here, let's get one thing straight. What they built is not luck. It's not an accident of geology, even though geology helped. It's 3+ decades of a country doing something almost nobody else was willing to do: subsidize an unglamorous, environmentally messy industry year after year, while everyone else chased quarterly earnings. Back in 1992, Deng Xiaoping stood in Inner Mongolia and said something that's been quoted so many times it's basically a proverb now. The Middle East has oil, China has rare earths. Historians actually argue about whether that was a grand master plan on day one or a line that got mythologized after the fact. Either way, China spent the next 3 decades acting like it was true. State-backed mines, state-backed refineries, state tolerance for pollution nobody else wanted in their backyard. And it worked. This video isn't about whether rare earths are rare. Most of them geologically aren't. It's about processing. It's about who can take dirt full of 17 jumbled up elements and separate it into something you can actually put inside a magnet. That's the chokehold. And this isn't a someday problem. It's already reshaping car factories, defense contracts, and quietly your 401k, just slower than any headline can capture. There are 17 rare earth elements. You will never need to memorize them. You just need to know what a few of them build. Neodymium and praseodymium go into the magnets that spin electric motors. A single large wind turbine can carry up to 2 tons of neodymium magnets. A Toyota Prius carries about 2 pounds of neodymium in its hybrid motor alone. Dysprosium and terbium get blended into those same magnets so they don't lose their strength when they overheat, which matters a great deal when the motor in question is inside a fighter jet or missile system. Curium sits inside your car's catalytic converter, quietly cleaning exhaust before it leaves the tailpipe. Gadolinium shows up in the contrast dye that makes your MRI scan readable. Samarium cobalt magnets, stable at extreme heat, end up in radar systems and guided munitions. None of this is exotic hobbyist material. It's the unglamorous connective tissue of a smartphone, a hospital, a car plant, and a defense contract all at the same time. Now here are the numbers behind the chokehold. China mines roughly 69 to 70% of the world's rare earths. That is a big number. It is not the scary one. The scary one is processing. China refines close to 90% of the world's rare earths, and for the heavy rare earths, the ones that go into the highest performance magnets, that number climbs toward 99%. You could mine rare earth ore in Wyoming, Nevada, Brazil, or Australia tomorrow morning. It would barely move the needle. Almost all of it still needs to take a trip through a Chinese refinery to become usable, because building that separation capability took China 3 decades, billions of dollars, and a tolerance for toxic byproducts most Western regulators would never permit at home. That is not evil genius. That is an extraordinarily patient industrial strategy the rest of the world simply chose not to compete with until it started to hurt. And this isn't theoretical. It's been used before. In September 2010, after Japan detained a Chinese fishing boat captain near the disputed Senkaku Islands, China quietly restricted rare earth exports to Japan. No announcement. Shipments just slowed. Japanese electronics and auto manufacturers felt it within weeks. The US eventually filed a complaint at the World Trade Organization. China lost that case and lifted its formal export quotas around 2015. But losing a WTO case doesn't unbuild a processing monopoly. So in April 2025, in response to a fresh round of American tariffs, China added 7 rare earth elements to an export licensing list: samarium, gadolinium, terbium, dysprosium, lutetium, scandium, yttrium. Within weeks, automakers in the US, Germany, and Japan were reporting supply disruptions. Some production lines paused entirely, waiting on magnets that never arrived. Then, on October 9th, 2025, China went further, announcing expansive new controls with global reach, covering not just shipments to the US, but rare earth technology and equipment headed anywhere in the world. 3 weeks later, at a summit in Busan, South Korea, Presidents Trump and Xi agreed to a 1-year truce. China would issue general licenses again, effectively pausing the new controls. Which brings us back to January 6th of this year, and Japan. A truce with Washington did not stop a separate restriction from landing on Tokyo 2 months later, over a single political comment. The lesson isn't that China is unpredictable, it's that this lever is fast, precise, and reusable. A 1-year truce with one country does not retire it. Here's the encouraging part, and it is still small compared to the size of the problem. Mountain Pass, California is the only significant rare earth mine operating in the United States, run by a company called MP Materials. On July 10th, 2025, the Department of Defense agreed to invest $400 million directly into MP Materials, becoming, on paper, the company's largest shareholder. JP Morgan added another $1 billion in financing on top of that. The plan includes a second magnet facility called 10X, expected to start commissioning around 2028, which would push total U.S. rare earth magnet manufacturing capacity to roughly 10,000 metric tons a year. 10,000 metric tons sounds like a lot, until you remember China has been processing at a vastly larger scale for over a decade. Some analysts think China's processing share could ease from around 90% down towards 75% by 2028 if projects like this one actually deliver on schedule. That is the realistic best case, not independence. A dent. Japan, meanwhile, has been quietly diversifying its own supply since 2010 and still relied on China for roughly 63% of its rare earth imports as recently as 2024. Building an alternative supply chain for something this specialized does not happen on a product cycle. It happens on a mine permitting cycle, 10, 15 years easily. So here's why this actually matters to you and not just to a defense contractor or an auto executive. This is slower than a bank run and quieter than a tariff headline. And that is exactly what makes it more dangerous, not less. A stock market panic resolves in days. A rare earth processing gap resolves in a decade because you cannot build a refinery, get it permitted, and staff it with trained chemists any faster than that, no matter how much money you throw at it. Remember the number I asked you to hold on to. 1. One mine, roughly 90% of global processing sitting with one country, and the export valve already turned on Japan, the US, and the global market in 3 separate years. If you own an auto stock, a chip maker, a defense contractor, or frankly just an S&P 500 index fund in your 401k, you already have exposure to this. You just did not know the mineral aisle was part of your portfolio. So what do you actually do with that? I think there are 3 moves people make here, and only one of them is worth making. The first move is loud. Panic. See a headline about export bans hitting car factories and sell your auto and tech holdings before you have even checked which companies depend on Chinese processed magnets in the first place. The second move is also loud. Just loud in the other direction. Chase it. See rare earths trending and pile into whatever small mining stock just popped 40% this week. Convince you found the next great trade before Wall Street did. The third move is quiet. It is simply not doing anything dramatic, staying diversified. Understanding that this is a decade-long structural story, not a trading signal, and that the company's actually solving it. MP Materials, Allied miners, defense contractors, rebuilding supply chains are already being praised by people paying far closer attention than a headline allows. Picture a key ring with 3 keys on it. 2 of them are bright, freshly cut, shiny enough that they look like they should open the vault. They don't. They jam half the time. The 3rd key is small, dull, worn smooth from actually being used. Nobody notices it. It's the one that turns. China spent 30 years machining a lock nobody else wanted to build. Your best move isn't finding a shiny new key to pick it overnight. It's not touching the vault at all and letting the dull key do its quiet work over the next 10 years.